A Fox News host attempted to cast doubt on Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna's explanation of Joe Biden's record and was very quickly shut down. Before diving into this story, I just want to let you know that I got hit with something pretty brutal sickness-wise, came down with a fever, only noting that in case you hear something weird with my voice, breathing issues, still trying to figure out exactly what it is. But with that being said, we charge forward. I have for you a moment from a recent interview that is so fantastic. It's Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna appearing on Fox News, and the Fox News host, Sandra Smith, attempts to cast doubt on the economic and policy record of the Biden administration and Democrats over the last 2+ years. But Ro Khanna luckily comes armed with the receipts. Now, I'll include my normal caveat with these sorts of stories. When I talk about the economic or legislative accomplishments of the Biden administration or Democrats, it's not to ignore the very real severe pain that is still present. Instead, it's taking into consideration the conditions that Biden took over within, and then what has happened since then. Where did he have the ability to make an impact? And then in which areas did the Democrats make a positive impact? Because things aren't going to be wonderful just a couple years after a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic and economic downturn. But are things better than they would have been if someone else, namely Donald Trump, was president? And that's where there is a lot of credit to be given to Biden and the Democrats. Here's Ro Khanna on Fox News.
The job creation is at a record high. Let's just look at some basic facts. Since the president has come into office, almost 14 million jobs created. Now, 70% of those are jobs that were recovered.
Can I just get in there? Because I try not to interrupt, but created is it's a very interesting word. Can you tell me what specific policy under this president created those jobs?
Yes, I actually can. The American Rescue Plan, which put in money into infrastructure and into helping people stay employed in small businesses. The infrastructure bill, which has led to a boom in construction jobs. The CHIPS Act, which has led to a boom in manufacturing.
The reason I ask is because a lot of that was a rebound from the COVID pandemic, correct?
70% of those jobs were recovered from the COVID pandemic. I'm acknowledging that. But here's the point. It was recovered within 2 years because of the American Rescue Plan. We could have been in a Great Depression. Give the president credit for the recovery and the creation of new jobs.
Okay.
And the reality is that this was the policy of the American Rescue Plan, of the CHIPS Act, of the infrastructure, of the Inflation Reduction Act. 4% unemployment used to be considered full employment in this country. The inflation in this country at 3.7% is less than inflation anywhere else in the world.
So why do I keep coming back to this subject of Biden's accomplishments? Because I think it's profoundly and unfairly underdiscussed. And how people vote is based on their perception of the president and their party. So if we're serious about wanting Trump to lose in 2024, as we should be, then we have to have these honest, accurate, and consistent conversations about the impressive record of the Biden administration, just looking at the facts. A friend of the show, Josiah from Pondering Politics, pointed this out recently, showing this Navigator research survey that I'll also show that reads, initially in the survey, President Biden's net approval rating is underwater by 18 points, 40% approve, 58% disapprove. After being presented, though, with a number of policies and actions describing the president's record while in office, Biden's approval rating increased by a net 11 points. 11 points, from net -18 to net -7. 45% approve, 52% disapprove, with shifts in net approval even higher among independents, net +20 from net -51 to net -31. And those who voted for Biden in 2020, net +13 from net +55 to net +68. So the point being emphasized there is the second you discuss with people and outline the successes of the Biden administration, their view of Biden dramatically shifts in a positive direction, at least for a lot of them. So when you discuss with people the American Rescue Plan, the PACT Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure law, all these popular and historic pieces of legislation that will benefit their lives in meaningful ways, the specifics of which I've gone over extensively in the past, it does affect people. So in part, we're talking about a lack of an awareness, and that being one of the problems at play here. So just like as people in the media and just in personal political discussions, we have to be honest and admit when the people in power mess up and fail. We also have to be honest when they get something right. There's nothing admirable as members of progressive media, for example, about just as a default constantly telling your audience that Biden and the Democrats have done nothing good, they're horrible, they're just as bad as the Republicans, just because that makes you feel like a more progressive person. It's important to acknowledge these achievements both for honesty's sake and to give people hope that things actually can get done. Your vote actually does matter and can help make some of these things happen. I encourage you, by the way, to go back and watch a recent video on the YouTube channel titled something like Trump releases a disturbing video to True Social, where I debunked this idea that Trump was great for the economy and the economy was good because of Trump, whereas Biden was horrible, and that's why we're seeing these different issues. If you take into consideration the situations, which is so crucial, in which the two presidents took over, it's hard actually to make that argument that Trump caused a great economy while Biden caused a bad one. But I won't get into comparing Trump, Obama, and Biden again this time as we did last, and instead just recap what am I referring to when I say Biden has an impressive economic record. To start, remember the context is so important. Biden took over a massive economic downturn. He didn't take over the good economic situation like Trump did, but a bad one. And then oversaw nearly 14 million jobs being added to the economy. As I'll always note, if you're going to brag about and be super hyped about the small decrease in unemployment under Trump that caused unemployment to hit that historic low figure before it, of course, spiked during the pandemic, then you must acknowledge how impressive it is to see a massive drop in unemployment after a crisis that got back down to hitting a historic low. Now, on this, I've heard the talking point, you kind of heard it there from the Fox News host, of, well, this is just all the jobs coming back that were created under Trump, which completely ignores all the jobs that were created under Obama that Trump just inherited. But even so, if you understand anything about how jobs work and how businesses work during crises like this, it doesn't make any sense to assume the light switch of the economy could just be switched on and off that easily. Jobs were permanently lost. Companies were permanently shut down during the pandemic. And it's really disingenuous, especially from Fox News hosts who point to the permanent business closures when saying that shutdowns were bad, to now act like they aren't aware that that happened. Jobs were just lost for good, and it wasn't something you could just snap your fingers and bring them all back. As Ro Khanna said, it's okay to assume that some, even most of the jobs would have come back, but number one, studies reveal they wouldn't have come back as quickly if certain policies weren't implemented, like the American Rescue Plan, which was attributed to have created millions sooner than they would have otherwise come back. And number two, some would have never come back. And all of these Fox News hosts and Fox News economists now pretend like they weren't just predicting a recession because of the horrible Biden administration, saying that, yeah, things look like they're coming back strong, but that's only because we're about to hit this massive recession because Biden's policies are so bad. Haven't seen any retractions on those predictions. And as I've said many times, the United States recovered faster than other comparable economies in the world, meaning even though the president and legislators only have a certain amount of power to affect the economy, if anything, Biden's and Democrats' approach assisted in creating a situation where our economy would outpace other G7 countries. And while inflation has been horrible, it's an obvious aftermath of the recovery efforts under Trump and Biden to a once-in-a-lifetime economic downturn that took place, I might add, before Biden was president. And of course, we know this to be the case. Any president would have dealt with it. And one of the ways we know this is if you look at the other industrialized economies we compare ourselves to, they experience it also. And when that comparison is done, you see that other G7 countries actually have higher inflation than we do. So a super impressive economic recovery after taking over an economic disaster, massive job growth, real wages increasing, GDP growth back strong as heck recently, unemployment back down. Meanwhile, Biden and Democrats oversee a pretty remarkable list of legislative victories, the infrastructure law, investing in projects that will help everyday Americans. How many times have we heard presidents, we're going to invest in infrastructure? It actually got done. Inflation Reduction Act, finally lowering prescription drug costs for seniors, and the largest investment in American history in green energy that will create millions of jobs. The American Rescue Plan providing that necessary COVID relief in a really brutal time, just to name a few, not to mention, and this does not get discussed enough, Biden's National Labor Relations Board, as the American Prospect put it, I'll always go back to this headline, brought workers' rights back from the dead. And Biden's now widely regarded as one of the most pro-labor presidents in American history. So I do think ignoring these facts in our media discussions about Biden's presidency is a disservice to the American people. Now, we didn't get paid family leave or a raised minimum wage or a public option. So there are absolutely failures too of his administration. But it seems like you have this really unfortunate situation where right-wing media has a machine that just pumps out attacks against Biden and the other side more generally, constantly, 24/7, often very dishonest attacks. And then liberal media doesn't want to come off biased, so they avoid accurate assessments of Biden's presidency when that would include a lot of positive conversations. And having these sorts of discussions is crucial, especially when we're getting polling out of the New York Times, as was discussed a lot today, showing Biden losing to Trump in 5 out of 6 battleground states. That's frightening. It's time to have these fact-based conversations. Here's Biden, by the way, a few months ago when he initially started using the term Bidenomics to describe his economic approach, outlining what it represents.
I knew we couldn't go back to the same failed policies when I ran. So I came into office determined to change the economic direction of this country, to move from trickle-down economics to what everyone on Wall Street Journal and Financial Times began to call Bidenomics. I didn't come up with the name. I really didn't. I now claim it, but they're the ones that used it first. I got asked by a press person this morning, getting on a helicopter in Washington, why, when I asked you about Bidenomics a long time ago, you said you didn't know what it was. I said, I didn't name it Bidenomics. I didn't realize the Economist and the Wall Street Journal did. But I think it's a plan that I'm happy to call Bidenomics. And guess what? Bidenomics is working. When I took office, the pandemic was raging and our economy was reeling. Supply chains are broken, millions of people unemployed, hundreds of thousands of small businesses on the verge of closing after so many had already closed. Literally hundreds of thousands on the verge of closing. Today, the U.S. has the highest economic growth rate leading the world economies since the pandemic, the highest in the world. As Dick said, with his help, we created 13.4 million new jobs. More jobs in 2 years than any president has ever made in 4, in 2. And folks, it's no accident. That's Bidenomics in action. Bidenomics is about building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. And there are 3 fundamental changes that we decided to make with the help of the Congress. We've been able to do it. First, making smart investments in America. Second, educating and empowering American workers to grow the middle class. And third, promoting competition to lower costs to help small businesses.
So listen, as someone who talks about politics for a living and also has tons of conversations about it in my personal life, I have really been struck by the negative perception of Biden in the country. It's definitely there. It's different sort of negative perception than Trump. People who rightfully oppose Trump are terrified of what he would do in a second term, whereas a lot of the centrists or left-leaning people that I talk to who are not super excited about Biden more so have an attitude towards him. And the 2 things I hear the most are, number 1, he doesn't seem as sharp as he used to, and number 2, the economy doesn't seem good. And so when I have these sorts of conversations, it's not because I'm trying to invalidate people's feelings. You're allowed, of course, to feel however you like about Biden and the Democrats, but I'm just trying to add some strong facts and data to the general vibes about Biden that are floating around. And yeah, he doesn't deliver speeches like he used to, but that's discussed like 24/7 across the media. How often are detailed policy and record assessments like this done of his presidency? Not that often, unfortunately. And so I do think it's important that we encourage people to engage with these facts more often as we enter into the 2024 election. Before we go, don't forget to become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership, as the last bits of my voice are being used to say this. An entire bonus show Monday through Friday exclusively for our members. Plus, follow me on Threads at Luke Beasley Official, Instagram at Luke Beasley Official, Twitter or X at Luke P. Beasley, and sign up for the Beasley Brief, a daily morning newsletter summarizing the previous day's events by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/brief. And I'll talk to you all, maybe, in the next video.